forward, we can take this information because on August the 28th, we're going to be having a training session with MSBA around issues of governance, and so we can take this information forward, as we have those conversations. So what I would like to ask at this time, and I think I'm going to break the discussion into three parts. Really, it's actually four. And the four parts will be this. Are there general data that we need to know on the entire school district? Is there specific data that we need to see as it relates to the high school? Is there specific data that we need to see as it relates to the middle school? Is there specific data that we need to see as it relates to pre-K, the pre-K grades through elementary? So at this point, I would just open the floor up for discussion, and I would ask if there's certain data, because we want to do two things. We want to be able to identify the data that we feel there's a need for, and we also want to have what I call a soft date or period around which we think it would be appropriate to see this information. Because what will end up happening is that we'll compile some information, we'll allow the superintendent to visit with this, and then we'll also have the board governance calendar, and we can begin to see how these things fit into that particular document. So at this point, I'll open the floor to anyone that wants to share information around data that the board feels that it needs to have in order to move forward in a governance way. So I'll stop talking so you can talk.
Okay. So for me, I would say that.
Your mic on?
Oh, I think so.
Move it closer to your mouth.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Just before you're talking, let me frame the conversation for Dr. Petty. So, Dr. Petty, what we're doing, we just read the board norms, and I went back to visit item number 1 that talks about the fact that we make data-driven decisions. So right now, we're just having an open board discussion around what type of data do we need to see relative to the district so that we as a board have a sense of understanding that the district is moving forward in the direction it needs to move in. And I broke the conversation down into 4 different areas. One is general questions about the whole district, questions about data related to the high school, questions about the middle school, questions about pre-K elementary. And so Director Roberts was getting ready to comment. So I'll stop talking.
So for me, this is one that I'm going to say we need general data, but then we also need specifics by location, or by those groupings that you gave, and that is.
Okay, is your mic on?
Yeah. Oh, I'm not talking into.
Bring it closer to your mouth.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so as I was saying, I think that there's some general data, but I think the general data has to also be broken down into smaller pieces. And what I'm speaking of specifically is like I would like to understand our staffing by general data. What do we look like as a district? And there's some specifics around that that we work through. But I want to see that also by location. And when I say staffing, I'm talking about certified teachers, I'm talking about counselors, I'm talking, all the different pieces so that we can see what we have in place to support our students.
Okay.
I'd like to see that every 2 weeks.
Okay, well, let me back up for a minute. Let me kind of clarify a little, to put a little bit more context around what we're doing.
Mhm.
The whole question around the data, in the very simplistic terms, the board looks at what's going on in the district and we'll identify the how of what we're concerned about. We share with the superintendent, this is the issue that we're concerned about. And then this particular data is designed to inform, we give him the how. Through the superintendent and the administration, they craft the how we're going to deliver it. And this data informs us on the effectiveness of that work. So that helps to clarify why we're going through this, because at the end of the day is designed to help us be able to measure effectiveness of whatever the work is he's
Right.
doing based on that data. As an example, if we're concerned about literacy in the district,
Exactly.
and we say superintendent, we're concerned about literacy. He puts together, he has director of elementary K2. They're doing some things. He has the iReady and whatever other strategies he's using. So he does that, and our measure of movement is to be able to look at iReady data as one of those metrics to show that whatever he's working on has forward
Right.
movement.
Right.
So that's the intent of this, is trying to help identify
Right.
some of those kinds of. Now what you said was it was general to the point I didn't capture it.
Okay.
So can you
Yes, I can
restate
restate it.
what you
Right.
think?
So, and forgive me if I don't get the language exactly right. What I'm looking for is an understanding by district, but then also by the groupings that you have here, of what our staffing looks like. Because one of the things that we have as a goal is that we want to have quality teachers, because quality teachers impact our learning outcomes. And we want to make sure that the teachers are working in the areas in which they have a specialty. They're certified areas. So what I want to understand is, where are, what does that staffing look like? The staffing levels, do we have all the jobs filled and so on? I want to understand what, are they working in the areas as certified? I want to know that also about our counselors and so forth, so that we can understand what supports are around our students to achieve the outcomes that are listed in our CSIP and other goals.
Okay.
Um,
And I think generally, once that staffing report is generated, everything we do is a work in progress. So if it comes forward and we find that it has what we need and it meets our needs, fine, we move on to something else. But if there's a need to adjust, amend, or clarify, that's the reason why I say everything we do around data has to have a level of fluidity until we believe we're getting the kind of information that we have the kind of dialogue between board and superintendent that we need
Right.
to have around the work.
Right.
Does anyone else? So I got staffing report as a
Right.
broad category.
Right. And can I add one other thing? I agree that you want to have like an overall, what the report is or what have you. But with staffing, what is also important to note is that it is a fluid process. And so it's not that you can do it once and done. You have to constantly monitor it. It should be something that, in any business, as a matter of fact, staffing is something that's usually reviewed once a week, so that we can understand where we are, that we understand who's going out, or whatever the nuance is, so that we can make intentional and planful replacements, so that there's never a gap in what it is that we're saying we need for those students to excel. So it's never a once and done. If we know that there's a retirement coming, we need to be planning for that. If we know there's a maternity leave coming, we need to be planning for that. I don't need to know all that detail, but I need to know that we've got a plan, and I need to know that somebody's looking at it on a regular basis.
So if I heard you correctly, you were asking if it's possible to have that report available at least bi-weekly.
Well, if we meet twice a month, I'd like to see it twice a month, just so
Okay.
I know where we are.
Okay. And what we'll do as we compile this list, I'm sure the superintendent's making note of this,
Right.
and then he can come back and share with us the reality of the request. How, if that's a frequency that his administration can deal with, if we have to do something different, but that has been noted. Anyone else have any other information?
I do.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Sorry. So mine is more, what does the district need and where can we gather those resources from? As far as if there's tutors needed for the students, do we have MOUs for tutors for the students, and are those students getting those resources? If they need services for their homes, let's say the whole washing machine deal, I remember that was in the talk, but is that still an active service that the students have? So I'm more concerned with what services are the students need, so we can help them get the education without them worrying about things, because a lot of the students have things going on in their personal life where school is there, but at the same time, that may not be their top priority because they have other things going on. So if the school needs something or they need volunteers, where can we get these volunteers from? If they need, I don't know, just what does the district need as far as supporting the students? And if we already have those MOUs in place, are they being active?
Okay. I do have it noted that your focus is around district needs and support of youth, and you talked about tutors, you talked about uh, washing machines and things like that to support the home. You talked about volunteers. I do know that a lot of this will come out of student support.
Mhm.
And so generally, I think, as I understand it, it would really be a look at, I know we have a number of MOUs, both in the past and in the present, that are providing certain services. And so I guess the underlying question to everything you ask is how do we determine what the students need so we can provide it? So is there a survey to the families? Is there a survey to the kids? How are we figuring out so that's not a question we can answer today, but that's the underlying question to everything she had. How do we do the needs assessment to figure out, what MOUs we need to stand up? So if in fact there's a process that we need to bring back to the board to explain, so the board can understand that, or there's data around these things, then that's a conversation we can have. Does anyone have anything else?
Yes, good evening. I'd like to say that we really need to look at what will be our mechanism for vetting any data that we receive. How will we ensure the authenticity of the data? There has been some inconsistency with regard to the data that's being shared in terms of the outcomes and in terms of the voice of the community. So we really need to look at a mechanism for how we're going to vet the authenticity of the data that's being submitted. I would agree that we need to focus on providing the needs of the children, but we have a number of MOUs that are providing needs and things for children. And before we add to that number of MOUs, we really need to have a real concrete way, which should be an internal function of the district, to really determine the effectiveness of these MOUs and what outcomes they actually are generating for students in their learning.
Now, just a clarifying question. You started at the beginning saying that the data would need to be vetted. Are you suggesting a process or a method that might be considered?
I'm suggesting that the board, as a whole and as a collective, explore a process that we can all agree on to ensure that the data that we're receiving is authentic. Therefore, we can then, in fact, make well informed decisions and make our votes really count and do the work that the citizens elected us to do.
Okay. And I think the other piece I heard as we talk about vetting data around authenticity, I think that's something that clearly falls back to the superintendent to be able to share with us whatever the data is, the fact that he's vetted it, what system he used for vetted, and the fact that the level of authenticity that we need to have in that data is available so we can make decisions because he's hired to provide that level of leadership for us. So we just need him to know whatever this data is. If there's a data concern, the first thing I would ask you to do is raise your hand and identify, I have a concern with this data and we need to do something. So at this point, I understand it was a very broad statement, but we may need to take it case by case as data comes up. If for some reason, because I work from the axiom, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, is a duck. So if we see data and it's walking like a chicken and not a duck, then we know we need to look at something. So I do understand. I did capture the fact that we need to vet the data. We need to make sure we have consistency of the data, and we need to further look at our effectiveness of the MOU. Now, one thing I would say, a couple months back, we do have MOUs that come forward, and one of the conversations around the MOU, there were two pieces that were needed to be added to the MOU. One, we normally get an assessment of the organization in terms of what they delivered in their data, but we also need to have an assessment by administration of their interpretation of what they're giving us to see whether or not they agree or disagree. If they agree, it's thumbs up, and we continue to move ahead, with that particular information. If it's not, then we thumbs down and figure out is there something we need to clarify before we can move forward, or if it's a situation we can move forward at all, then we need to understand that as well. Uh, I know that you're looking to add another question, but I want to hear from the other board member. I want to hear from the other board members before everybody gets their second round.
Before you move forward, you want to make sure you're capturing the totality of my comments. And what I spoke to is that we need to, as a board, ensure that there are internal functions and internal mechanisms whereby which the district is making determinations as to whether or not the MOUs and other contractual agreements that we enter into as a district are in fact benefiting children in their learning. They are in fact supporting the work that teachers do on behalf of students in their learning every single day. And in doing so, the board should not be at the mercy of information being supplied to them by the superintendent. The board should be able to receive and collect its own information to make a determination that if, in fact, the internal mechanisms of the district are not functioning properly, then who or what department do we hold accountable for this?
Okay, I simply captured it by saying there needs to be internal mechanisms to ensure the effectiveness of MOUs.
Can I?
But there's the important piece is that we need to make sure that those internal mechanisms report back to the board in a way that the board can make informed decisions and the board can begin to hold the district accountable for the outcomes that the community elected us to pursue.
Okay, um, let me dig under that just a little bit to clarify it. As I heard you, I think we need to have a clear understanding of the MOU process from the very beginning. Everything it takes from beginning to end before it comes to us, we need to understand what that process is. So when it comes to us at the back end, we have assurances that there's integrity in each of those phases. So when a recommendation comes forward saying we're going to do X, Y, or Z, everybody has a good, clear understanding of what process is. Just like if we were doing a contract, we go through a process where we understand you do this, you do this. So I understand that piece. So, and I'm sure
But I want you to understand that we're going through that process now and we're
right.
not getting the outcomes. Things are not happening as they should. Things are not being resolved. And we can discuss those in an executive session if that's the more appropriate time for that discussion. But we're going through that kind of a process that you're describing now, and it's not happening. And I think that we're all pretty much aware of that. We're all hearing that. So, what is our response as a board when things don't occur as they should? When the district is not functioning as it should, what is our response? It's not about reviewing the MOU process, it's about how do we as a board properly address and function as a board that moves the district forward.
Okay, I do understand it. And were you able to capture that as well? Okay, okay.
Can I add something to that? I think, and help me if I'm not hearing this
Sure.
correctly. I think what's important to note is that it's not about do we have an MOU and for said service for tutoring, which is use as an example,
Correct.
but it's really about do we have the best MOU with the best resource that has the best track record and the best proven result? Are we using people who have demonstrated that they can get the outcomes that we're saying that we want?
Absolutely.
And initially what I will respond is say this: we are a whole district full of people that work for the superintendent, and it's their job to do what you just said. And it's our job to have a conversation with the superintendent to make sure that we have and get what it is we need to do to function as a board. So I clearly understand that. I'm sure the superintendent is hearing that. I'm sure Tony Brooks is hearing that. Does anyone else have any other questions or things because already as part of the data, there's certain things that we get. We're getting information on around iReady, each time we do it. And I think it will be very interesting because iReady now, this is the first time we're actually doing benchmarking grades 9 through 12. And so to be able to see that data, to see how our kids are doing on those benchmark assessments will be good. Other kinds of things, as we move towards the training on August 28th for MSEP 6, a lot of the pieces of data that we're talking about is going to come up as part of MSEP 6, things like looking at ACT, looking at end of course exams, all of those kinds of things, we're looking at data around attendance and behavior. So we just want to do a comprehensive look. See, it's almost, as we go through this process, it's almost as though uh, over time, the board will build its own data dashboard. So it will have certain metrics that it looks at to understand the level of progress and effectiveness of the district. Erica, did you have anything you want to share?
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some things around data. So, any questions that I ask about data directly correlates with our strategic plan and our strategic priorities. So, when the data that I find necessary to best inform us and make decisions as a board would be the data that directly supports our strategic priorities. And so one of the data points that most interests me outside of what our other directors have shared already is attendance and enrollment. And so that's just making sure that it directs to our strategic priority number one: engaging environments, provide safe and engaging learning environments. And I know most of everybody, well, we all here should know that. So that data helps us continuously have a idea on which or how our district is moving forward in supporting our strategic plan.
I agree.
And the accuracy of that data is crucial to not only the functioning of the district, but also crucial to our official state reporting. We cannot afford to have our funding jeopardized when there is even the suggestion of impropriety as it relates to recording student attendance data.
And as I said before, because data in and of itself is a very broad concept, and so as we approach data, if there comes data that there's a reason to question or to take a closer look at, we need to identify what that is, as I said, on a case by case basis, because I don't want to operate from the premise that every piece of data we have is flawed and that we need to examine everything. But if we do in fact look at something that requires a closer look, then by all means we need to have a closer look and have an understanding of that information. So
I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that every piece of data that is presented to us is flawed. What I will, however, suggest is that we're not being presented the data in a timely fashion. We're not being presented the data in a fashion where we actually have time to read it thoroughly, review it, understand it, confer with experts in the field, get second, third, and fourth opinions so that we can come back and do the work that the voters elected us to do, which is to vote with an informed decision. We have not that occurred since I've been reelected to this board, and I have voiced that concern verbally and in writing.
okay, and I do acknowledge and recognize what you said. Now, I just want to share.
Thank you for acknowledging that I've brought that up before.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Okay, I do want to. I got a note earlier today from a board member, and I'm gonna put it on the table. We're not going to take any action on it, but I want us to reflect and think about this process. And part of this process is something that the superintendent has brought up before, but because of the way we've always operated like we've always operated. And so the suggestion is this: that our executive session should occur before all regular board meetings. That we do that first, because you've said that before. And then the comment was, then we have our regular meeting, because if there's something that needs to be nuanced, we nuance it before the regular meeting in executive session. And then the other piece of it was that if there are things that, instead of us having a situation where, we'll get something dropped, the meeting of, you'll get some information, you need to look at this, it is also suggested that we look at having a work session 2 weeks before every board meeting. And the intent of that is that if there is information that needs to be digested, researched, reviewed, that you have 2 weeks before the meeting in which we come together, we do whatever, and then you have 2 weeks in which to ask questions, kick the tires, see what it is. So by the time we get to the board meeting, we're ready to move ahead. So I know that that's a paradigm shift in terms of how the board works. Uh, I haven't even had a chance to share that with Harlan yet. So, but I thought that it was substantive enough to put it on the table to start thinking about it because right now, we got to look at the mechanics of how you do what we do. But I thought it was something I at least want to put it on the table. I'll talk to Harlan because just so you know, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when I brought up the board sessions, I said we should have meetings every 2 weeks or at least once a month. Then it was, oh no, due to time restrictions, we should have them every quarter. That was switched up. That's in
Okay,
the email that I wrote.
I got you. And
Okay,
okay,
wait. And now it's, oh, we should do that. I said that already.
and
Okay, and then the next thing is if we have an executive session before our regular board meetings, are you meaning the day of, or are you meaning a different day as opposed to the same day as the board meetings?
I would.
Because I don't know about everybody else, but I have a day job. So I wouldn't, I mean,
Well, the executive
just,
session would actually start at 6 o'clock. It would start at the same time as the regular meeting. You just do the executive session at 6. When you finish that, you go into the regular meeting.
well, as many opinionated people on this board, do you honestly think that a executive session is just going to last 1 hour?
It depends. It depends on how we frame the content. But at this point, I acknowledge the fact that you did mention it earlier, and for what uh, history has a way of being cyclical. So we're back around to the idea that you suggested.
That it should be so that we could get the information that we're missing because the district has so much information floating around. Some of it's false, some of it's true. But I suggested that, and then it was like, oh no, we should just do it. We should do it quarterly. So that's why I came up with the quarterly schedule.
I acknowledge both your initial idea
Okay.
and the current one. And what I'm simply saying is that in order to do business differently, we have to do business differently. And
And the different mind brought it, but it was
right.
rejected. I just want to throw that out there.
But at this point, I'm revisiting that difference. So it's currently on the table for consideration. And right now, I just ask people to kind of think through it. I'm sure Harlan will probably look at this, after the meeting, but I'm going to have a conversation with them just to kind of let them know where we are relative to that structure. Because one of the things that I think that structure will do what it would do for us as a board. It will give us intentional time to have meaningful discussions around whatever the issue is. And so at this point, I want to put it on the table. So let's reflect on it because I want us to come back to it. And what we can do as we move towards that training on August 28th, where we're talking about that whole CSIP and the governance piece, that's a good time to process that to settle on what it is that we exactly want to get. Ms. Taylor, do you have anything you want to add around data?
Yes, and while we're reflecting on that, let us also consider that and I think it's a great suggestion that we hold the executive session first, keeping in mind a lot of times on the agenda for the regular board meeting, it's an extensive agenda, and it can be very time consuming, like Director Pearson said. And we know sometimes it can go go long. And there's another thing she said, some of us do work and some of us have to get up early in the morning. And so it is a lot that needs to be considered. Maybe we could possibly do it the day before.
Yeah. Well, at this point,
Just a suggestion.
I think the structure of what we have is up to the board to craft a structure that makes sense for us. One of the things we can look at, we have a document that we've approved earlier called the governance calendar. That governance calendar walks us through month by month what we want to look at as a district. Calendar between the conversations between the superintendent and the board president, we can modify that by adding things, moving it to a different month. All we have to do is communicate what's coming forward. So we have to just intentionally use the tools that we have to move in the direction that we want to go. So do we have any other comments about data before I move forward.
I have
So
a comment.
Wait a minute. Go
Get a
ahead.
chance to make my comment. I do want to say I agree with everything that's already been said, so I don't have to repeat anything that they said as far as what it is that we need to do, what should be done. As far as the data that we receive, finding another way to make sure that the data is accurate, uh, as Director Patty said. So I just wanted to put it on the table. I agree with everything that each and every one has said.
Okay.
So can I add one other thing? I think your concern is valid about like sometimes we have a long list of things
We have
that
a very long list.
but I think if we use the board work sessions a little bit differently, we can cut some of that down. So yeah, I mean I wasn't here. So I think for instance, if there's an MOU that needs to be shared, they can share that in a work session, but then we don't vote on it until the meeting. So I think what that will actually do, hopefully, is it will balance it out so that we don't have the extensively
Yes,
long meetings.
yes.
And I think the other thing is that as the leadership for the district, sometimes you have to say, uncle, we can't do this many things, okay, because then we're not giving it our due diligence. And I see Dr. Triplett going down there going, yeah, because sometimes we just have to say no. I mean, he's got things that he's got to have viewed, and other things that are nice to have viewed. And so I think that's a conversation that Mr. Humphreys and Harlan need to have as to, okay, here are the three things we know we want, but he really needs us to talk about iReady or whatever it is. And then something may have to get pushed to the next session because there's only so much time, and he's not getting the benefit of our good thoughts if we're, trying to run out the door.
Right.
You know,
And I do acknowledge the comments that everyone has said. I know we have the videotape, so if we need to go back and look at it, because I know we've covered a lot, but I also know that the superintendent and the secretary are taking copious notes,
Yes.
and so at some point, we can begin to process this as we move forward. If there's no other questions around data, because there's certain data, just by virtue of the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, you got the end of course stuff, you got the ACT results, you got any of those kinds of things. So all of those things are going to be a normal part of whatever it is. And I think one of the things that we have to do is just make sure that as a board, we understand what the district's assessment calendar is, when they're actually doing the testing, when the results are available, and when something might be coming forward at some point for us to look at. But that's a broader conversation. If there's no other comments around this subject, I'm getting ready to move to another part of the agenda. Yes, ma'am.
Do have a question. So, as far as an assessment calendar, are you asking for like a short brief? Um, this is when they'll take already. This is the one they'll take the already test. This is when they'll take MAP. This one they'll take ACT. Or are you asking for like more detailed calendar?
Now, for the most part, it's basically when they actually take it and when the board will see those results. That's really all I'm talking about. Because they have an assessment calendar where 3 or 4 times a year they're going to do already. And then we just need to know once that data is available, the superintendent will say, okay, we're looking at literacy. Here's our already data around literacy. This is what we're looking at. And see, with most data, uh, and I'm sure that we could have conversations around that. But in order for data to make sense from an understanding standpoint, I personally like to see 3 years of data. So I need to see the current data, the year before that, because that's the way you're making progress. Because if you look at one set of data in isolation, you don't necessarily have the broader context that you need to have. But that's another part of a data discussion. I think the conversation we've had today is very rich. I think what we need to do is take this rich conversation and convert it into something that we can use going forward. I ask everyone to be reflective over the possible amendments to how we do business as a board. And then at some point when we come forward, we can solidify that so we're all on the same page. So if we're okay there,
I just want to make a comment on what you just said. Because you have been on the board longest, have you in the past gotten the information that you're requesting tonight? Because I hear you always asking about the data.
yes,
And so,
absolutely.
so
Yes.
you have always gotten it. Okay.
Yes. And see, the data in and of itself, it informs the work. Because if we see, there's a couple of things. You got the test and instruction that moves data, but you also have professional development from teachers that move student data. So it all has to come together. And so yes, the kind of data we're talking about, as a matter of fact, I've had training through MSBA. I took a course years back. It was called The Data Made Me Do It. It was a course on data driven decision making. And so the more adept we come at using and understanding our data, the better we understand where we are as a district and how to move forward. Um, I'd like to move to 4.01, which is now the MOUs. And at this point, Tony Brooks, I know that you have a shopping list of MOUs. Here's what we're going to do tonight on the MOUs. He's going to he's going to briefly come to each one of them. He's going to tell us what it is. If there's any money associated with it, he's going to tell us what the money is. We're not going to vote to approve any of them tonight. All this is an item for information. We're going to go through this, and then when we get at the next meeting, I'm sure the board president will then at that point have the MOUs up for a vote. So at this point, Tony, I'll give the floor to you so you can go forward from there.
Good evening, Superintendent. Good evening, Board of Education. As Mr. Humphrey mentioned, I will be reviewing some of the MOUs that are being presented. The first MOU that we have to be presented is called Access Point. The purpose of this MOU is to, and you all have this in your documents, to educate and empower high potential, low resource students in real world hands-on information systems and related training that will enable them to be employed for IT positions. The other question you asked about cost. None of these should have an associated cost to them. Well, none of the ones that we're talking about should have an associated cost that impacts the district. There are some that that you discussed earlier that were put to the side that you all won't discuss tonight. But the remainder of these should not have a cost to the district.
Okay, thank you.
The next one is Annie Malone Children and Family Services. It's a state called SAFER program. This MOU basically allows us to coordinate and implement necessary or beneficial by leadership. So principals have intake. Principals have a voice, and we are if we have someone has said no to receiving services from Annie Malone. The goal of this MOU and the partnership is to reduce the prevalence of youth substance misuse and youth mental health concerns in the area. The mental health and parenting and family engagement. For Access Point, the service category is academic support.
Is what?
Academic support for the Access Point MOU. There are two BJC MOUs. One is focusing on embedded school counselors. The other one is focusing on what's called the Teen Outreach Program. The first MOU, the purpose of it regarding embedded school counselors is as an administrative agent of the Missouri Department of Mental Health, Division of Comprehensive Psychiatric Services. This MOU will set forth the terms for BJC to provide behavioral health services and other specialized services to adults, youth, and children designated in designated service areas and school mental health consultation services using an advanced practice registered nurse. So it's not just for the students that are attending the school. It's a community. Impact as far as this MOU, and that service category is obviously mental health.
And what was the name of that MOU?
It's called Embedded School Counselors, where we'll use individuals where BJC will provide different individuals who will come and assist people who show a need in the community. The second BJC MOU again is called TOP, the Teen Outreach Program. This MOU focuses on the agreement between BJC, St. Louis Children's Hospital, the Wyman Center, and Normandy regarding the implementation of this teen outreach program. It focuses as well on mental health and academic supports. So it's focusing more on the obviously secondary level of the district and basically give kids an opportunity to have someone to talk to and in addition to engage in different activities after school. The next one is CHAD's Coalition for Mental Health. This MOU will establish a partnership between CHAD's coalition and Normandy schools to ensure the highest level of support for youth within our schools, outlining the roles and responsibility of each party and increase communication while providing suicide prevention presentations and training in classes, and also having the social emotional and well-being supports and family support counseling services. Again, this is focused on mental health. Gateway to Oral Health Foundation, by the name, this MOU obviously is focusing on providing preventative and restorative dental care for the students in our community. There's a dental van that comes, a portable dental van that comes fully equipped, and they service our students on the parking lot without taking kids out of school and leaving them there and giving them and doing follow-up service as well. This service category is physical health. Girls in the Know. This MOU allows Girls in the Know to provide a empowerment workshop series, which includes topics such as female empowerment, puberty, bullying, self-esteem, nutrition, exercise, safety, and career inspiration of female students between the ages of 9 and 13. The service category for this is mental health as well. The Jewish Family Service MOU has a focus on child abuse prevention. The purpose of this MOU is to deliver child abuse prevention program presentations throughout the school at the preschool level all the way through 12th grade. Again, this focuses on mental and physical health. The next MOU is Lindenwood University. This MOU focuses on Missouri field placement and school counseling, where basically members of our faculty and staff will be able to utilize our own schools to get their clinical experiences. There are a certain number of hours that they have to make. Once they do that, in addition to the program, then they are able to meet the requirements for graduation. Having to basically grow our own in this program, in this partnership with Lindenwood. The service category for this is academic supports. Operation Food Search and Operation Backpack, we've worked with them a lot in the past, and this MOU will formalize the mutually beneficial partnership between our district and Operation Food Search. This partnership is intended to reduce the burden of family food insecurity and contribute to the academic success of our children in the region. In addition to utilize backpack program, and this focuses on just some of the basic needs that our families have on a day-to-day. Parents as teachers. This MOU sets forth the terms and agreements for parents as teachers to provide this parent education services, families and those with children birth through kindergarten completion within the 24 hours. And we want to increase school readiness and success, like statutory requirements to provide parenting education. This MOU is on our students at ELC and our families at ELC. Service category focuses on academic supports, basic needs, mental health, physical health, and parent and family engagement. Project Make It. The purpose of this MOU is for them to participate in the 24-25 school year and also have a mini golf challenge. The goal of this program is to teach mechanics, engineering, physics, coding, and teamwork in a means that's fun to students and attractive to students. The service category for this is academic support. The Poor Collective which is around the corner at St. Vincent's. Their MOU is focusing on looking at the responsibilities and expectations between the core collective and the district. This MOU is seeking to establish a partnership with the district to provide therapeutic mental health services for students who attend Normandy Schools Collaborative. In addition to, they have an after-school program and they get assistance when they're attending there. And the service category is mental health. The Little Bit Foundation. This MOU will establish a partnership between the Little Bit Foundation and Normandy Schools Collaborative, where they'll provide services at the Normandy Early Learning Center to support student success. Our programs address barriers such as food insecurity, undiagnosed health conditions, a lack of winter clothing, proper hygiene, insufficient reading material in the home, and enrich the learning environment with programs not readily available to underserved students that expand their world knowledge, such as STEM curriculum and career planning. The service category for this is meeting basic needs, also academic supports and physical health for students. UMSL, College of Optometry and the Mobile Eye Center. As the name suggests, it's a mobile eye center to come and visit our schools. They diagnose our students, give eye exams. In addition to, they provide glasses. And even if the students didn't receive glasses from us or anywhere for that matter, they will replace them free of charge. And they do this every year. The service category, physical health. Washington University in St. Louis, Chronic Disease Collaborative. This MOU sets forth the terms for a partnership with district personnel to support the development and implementation of care coordination supports for students with chronic diseases, specifically asthma and sickle cell disease, by allowing our collaborative team to identify determinants, which are barriers and facilitators, and impacting care coordination and communication between health system providers, school personnel, and families across the educational, medical, and home settings. Map the existing data infrastructure supporting youth with asthma and co-develop and pilot a service model to support and facilitate communication and communication between school, home, and medical settings for youth with asthma. Service category as physical health. And the last one is with Washington University from the School of Medicine and Brown School of Social Work. With district personnel to support of existing mental and behavioral health resources, family challenge to connect students and families with behavioral and mental health resources and services. Co-develop the pilot implementation strategies to increase effective teacher use of intervention to connect students to behavioral and mental health resources and services. The service category for this, again, is mental health. Those are all we have for this evening.
All right, we thank you very much for that presentation. Does any board member have any question about anything that he discussed this evening?
Yes, I would.
Well, she, when you start off,
Let him go. Let him go.
go ahead, Dr. Patty.
Dr. Brooks, when you began speaking, and thank you for being here tonight,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for your presentation. When you began speaking this evening, you spoke of MOUs that were taken from this list. Would you be so kind as to identify what MOUs were removed?
Sure. Mr. Humphrey, would you like to speak to that?
When you say which ones were removed,
Well, I didn't say that. Dr. Brooks said that there were no costs associated with the MOUs that he was mentioning. Other MOUs were removed from what he was presenting.
okay,
He said, so what I'm asking, what MOUs were removed?
okay, Jerry, okay, you weren't here just to clarify that the MOUs regarding beyond housing, the wraparound services, and that whole piece. It was pulled from the list. The board wants to have more detailed discussion on that, and so we're going to be having that in very short concerning just that particular item. So those were the ones that came off the list.
Absolutely. And then I just have one comment. I know that Dr. Brooks is working diligently in the capacity of student support services, and he will be working as hard as he can, tirelessly, to ensure that these MOUs are effective. But just a few short years ago, it was duly noted the number of MOUs that were in place and the lack of impact and evidence-based data that would show that these MOUs were actually benefiting our students. And when you look at all of what's presented here, it's almost a travesty and inexcusable that our students are not performing better than they are.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else have any other comments? Ms. Roberts.
I just wanted to, I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. So I went through, I was tracking with you, but there were like a couple of MOUs that were mentioned that weren't in the board docs. Is that correct? So we'll get those so we can take a look at those.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then also, just because I'm learning, so all of these services that are provided, how all these services are provided, and some of them you specifically spelled out were like early learning center, but the rest, for the most part, it seems like they were across the district. How are these services connected with our in-house service providers, i.e., our social workers, our counselors, and so forth? Is there synergies between them?
Indeed, they work hand in hand, especially when we're talking about our high need students. We have care teaming in buildings, which basically is a cadre of individuals, a cadre of professionals regarding our partnerships and internal, whether it's counselors, psychiatrists, or psychologists, and we all work together to make sure we put forth the best strategies to assist our students in whatever issues that they're having.
Okay.
Right now, there is a rise in mental health concerns. So we're implementing social emotional learning curriculum in addition to just making sure we keep in touch with our wraparound services to help not just our students but our families as well. So to answer your question, they go hand in hand from family engagement liaisons to our counselors and social workers who work for the district.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, along that same vein, so when you're talking about social emotional learning and things like that, so the providers and the internal and external providers are working together. Are we also bringing our teachers into that so they can learn different types of strategies and so forth for the classroom? Is one question. And the second question is, when it comes to evaluation of how these folks are working, specifically our external folks, our internal folks, getting an opportunity to really provide feedback, and are we really looking at what that teaming looks like?
Yes, ma'am. To answer your question, the first question regarding teachers being a part of it, the answer is yes, teachers are, because a lot of these things are happening in classroom during advisory time. The second part is they do have an opportunity to contribute. Every MOU, every partner is evaluated, and they must provide data to show that what they're doing is effective. If they were an existing MOU last year and they were evaluated, we evaluated them every quarter. This year, we'll be evaluating them once at the end of the year. But in doing so, we'll make sure that everything that they do is data driven, and they have to show the capacity to impact students.
Why the change from once a quarter to once a year?
Because what we were doing, the data that they're collecting, it takes longer to collect data to show where they were, to get that baseline data and show what it is that they've been able to do. So when you looked at it quarterly, the growth was incremental versus what we did at the beginning and at the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but I'm like, what if you have a situation where it's not, or you've got a provider and they're not working out? That means we won't know that until the end of the year.
No, that doesn't mean that, because I'm always doing informals, and
Okay.
we have at Beyond Housing, we have wraparound meetings quarterly. So that's where it stemmed from. But because we have those wraparound meetings, there isn't necessarily, and then at those wraparound meetings, that's what they do. They report what they're doing. They're reporting what type of impact that they're having. Hence, we only have to do it at the end of the year for a formal evaluation.
Are there members, do you have members of your team that are also, because Beyond Housing is not part of our district. So do you have team members within the district that are helping you with this process?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what do they do?
They do the same thing. They go to the meetings. They help supervise counselors and social workers and ensure that they're meeting the needs and working with our partners as well. They're an extension of what I do.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
Okay. So are they using our data to help to provide direction as to what it is that is going to be done? Or are we letting the outside services tell us what it is that need to be done?
They have to establish measurable objectives from at the very beginning of the year to tell us what data that they will be using. So it's their job to make sure that they create data that we can find to be true, that we can trace, and we can ensure that it's accurate. And from that data, if we see that what they're doing is effective, then we make a decision to
Okay, when you say it's their job, you mean the vendor,
no, just the partner.
the part.
For instance, if we're talking about um, mental health. If we're talking about mental health, a good way to gather data, as Mr. Humphrey said earlier, is to take surveys of students
Right.
from again where they were at the very beginning, based on after receiving these services, if it has an impact on their growth.
But the vendor is driving the, what, I'm just trying to clarify how it's being driven. So the vendor is determining what the need is, and the vendor is determining how to evaluate the need. And what we're doing is we're coming to the meeting and we're listening to the feedback from what they've determined that they feel like they need to do.
No, ma'am.
No. So, Director Milton Roberts, what happens is the district provides these entities with some baseline information, some holistic information, not individual information, because you can breach confidentiality. But if it's wraparound services, here are the issues we're having, and here are the discipline issues we're having around these problems, these socio-emotional problems. So that information is given to the vendors. And so from that, the vendors start gleaming a treatment plan, if you will, to say, okay, we have enough information to where we could provide this service to the entire district or building. So they get building specific information to make sure they're on top of that.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Fisher, do you have any questions?
I forgot a few of them. One of them is a few of these MOUs were discussed during the last meeting. Am I correct? Or the last meeting and the meeting before that, because I remember Keisha Lee from Annie Malone. Okay, so and my second
Yes.
question, I forgot. It's been
Eyeglasses.
so long, but my main question is though a few of them were split up between last meeting and the meeting before, and then she already asked a question about the ones that were mentioned on here. You would end up giving us a information on it.
Yes, ma'am. Originally, we had two that were to present, but we have quite a few. So by the time they would be done presenting, we'd be well into the
10
second
o'clock.
half of the year. So we want to try to put these services in schools as soon as possible. Hence, we're giving them to you guys now.
Okay, I still have questions. I'm sorry. So the only thing that I didn't really understand was it Chads or Chats?
Chads.
Chads.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No problem.
I guess I have one other question. So when I was looking,
Wait a minute, just before you go there, she was not clear about Chad's. Go back and revisit Chad's and put some context to it. So
Was clear about it was the
the
name.
name,
oh, Chad's, it was just the name.
Yeah,
I thought
just
maybe it
the
was the
name.
content.
yeah, no,
I apologize. Let's keep going.
okay, so
Well, I tell you what, before you come back in, I'm coming up the line and I'll come back to you. Sedgwick, do you have anything?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for joining us this
Hi,
evening.
Ms. Edwards.
There are several MOUs, and I appreciate how they are all compiled in this document. And I also appreciate the service categories that you aligned each MOU with. I would ask kindly in the future, because the strategic the CSIP plan is a part of our governing document, that the MOUs can be aligned with the strategic priority that it applies to, because we have several MOUs that kind of overlap, and they may fit in one priority better than they fit in
Yes,
another.
ma'am.
So I would appreciate, if that's possible, I would appreciate that. My next question would be, we spoke a little bit about the data that will be shared or compiled to provide with our partners. And we spoke about data before we got into the MOU session. Will the board have access or be provided that same data as well as the data that be provided to our partners?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the last one is there are multiple MOUs about around the SEL. And so has there been ever explored a SEL program that better suits our district outside of so many MOUs being implemented?
So you're asking, has there been one uniform SEL program
Yeah.
that we've considered?
Yeah.
We know, but that's what this an SEL curriculum will do. Will bring uniformity to what it is that we're doing with the district. So the idea is to have the same services, the same opportunities across the board for this curriculum. So it's not just secondary or elementary, and those who are providing these services can contribute via curriculum.
Okay. Thank you.
No
Director Edwards, one of the things we're doing because our um, immigrant population is growing so fast, is that we're looking at expanding our ability to provide services in several of our elementary buildings, and probably even our middle and high school. So we're in the midst of hiring 2 more SEL teachers. So that's part of that curriculum piece, along with people who are experienced in that classroom. You don't necessarily have to be a second language person. You just have to be familiar with how to delegate, not delegate. I'm sorry, how to educate within that class.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tripp.
Ms. Taylor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm great, Miss Taylor. How are you?
I just had a question. I just wanted a little more information concerning. It's called access points, and on that particular document, I know that it is an MOU. I was kind of concerned because at the very end of that document, let me go down there. There was some information regarding funding, and I just wanted to confirm that because MOUs, that's not, just for clarification, we are not paying them for these services. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And on this, it has stated, it says funding. The partner agrees to procure and maintain the requirements of funding for the proper implementation of programming as indicated above. The partner will notify Normandy School Collaborative if and when funding for the program is not sufficient to implement it as indicated above. And I just wanted clarification because on here it says Normandy School Collaborative agrees to provide funding
Right.
in the total amount of $525 per student, up to 10 students starting August of the student's senior year and until the student graduates, to be paid directly to the higher education institution for the implementation of the program as indicated above. So I'm trying to be clear that that's not, uh,
It will be a zero cost.
it will be a zero cost to us, okay? Because the way it's worded, it's saying they're going to work, and when I read it all over, it's going to teach them IT skills, on the job training. Is going to prepare them for the future. But then when I got to that point, I was kind of concerned because I was thinking if it's an MOU, why would Normandy, be responsible for any of the costs? I just want a clarification on
Well, as with an MOU, there can be cost to it.
that. Can't
But
be.
Dr. Triplett was clear on
Mm-hmm.
we won't have any MOUs with cost because we have many who want to contribute.
And I have heard our superintendent say that many times. That's why when I read that one, I was concerned, and I wanted to make sure that I did bring that one out. Thank you.
No problem.
Is that verbiage in the MOU necessary then? Because
Uh,
if that's causing a concern,
It
it
is
does appear as though the
necessary.
possibility of us incurring costs is definitely implied, if not there as a legal precedent.
Mhm.
So is that verbiage necessary in the MOU? And perhaps we need to revisit that and
It could
get
be
a
revised.
cleaner copy.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It could be revised.
thank you.
Also, could I also add, because I'm thinking reading that, and this is like 8 pages, but I was thinking that there was something in effect to that. It says that if that student failed to complete this program,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
possible that Normandy would be responsible for repaying that money back to that organization.
I'll make sure it says there will be zero cost to
And
Normandy
thank you.
Schools Collaborative.
Thank you, Director Petty. Yeah.
Yeah, I thank you very much for the presentation. I don't really have any questions because all of my colleagues have asked a sufficient number of questions to the point that I'm comfortable. Are you ever?
Just have one more. I'm sorry. I know that we went from like 64 MOUs to like 11. So what's the count now?
Right now, we have a total of 18, and
Okay.
then we have 5 that are being considered in addition to. So we'll be well under 30. We'll max out at about 25.
Okay. Thank you.
And the only comment I have, and I'll revisit what I said earlier, my only conversation is around the back end evaluation. When we have the programs, how they were very robust in our review of of whatever the offering is from the MOU, and that we do in fact have deliverables, measurables, and that we understand what it is we're getting for that engagement with that organization. And to me, it's vitally important that the district in addition to the assessment that the organization gives, that we look at it, give our due diligence to say, yes, I agree with this, or no, I don't, it didn't work well, they blowing smoke. And at the end of the day, we need to make certain that the recommendation coming to the board is as a result of due diligence and looking at the work that those organizations are doing, because these are our children at stake, and we want to make sure that we're getting the best quality support for them that we can get. That's my only comment. Um, sure, go ahead. Then we're gonna move back to something I missed.
This will be quick. Earlier, Mr. Humphreys mentioned the fact that we have like a governance calendar and so forth. And so one of the things that I was a little bit concerned about as I started reviewing these was that many of them seem to have the MOUs seem to have expired, several months ago, but then there was a new MOU signed, by your office, but it yet hadn't been approved. So I don't know if we're on the right timing to make sure that you're all set to go like at the beginning of school.
Every MOU has to be renewed annually. So
Right. No, I understand that, but
I think y'all want to.
So Director Milton Roberts, thank you for that question, because um, um, Vice President Humphrey and I had that conversation. I've also had a conversation with Dr. Brooks earlier this week about let's allow the board to vote on it and after we make the recommendation before we sign.
yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, so we did have that conversation. All right. At this point, I appreciate the presentation. Um, I know that as the superintendent and Harlan get together for the next regular agenda, I'm sure that all of these they'll manage the process in terms of when these come back up for a vote. But I wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to hear what they are. You've had a chance to read them, and if there's any questions that you have about anything, we want to raise those questions and clarify them before we get to the vote. Because when these come back up again, we're looking for is a vote. We don't really need any discussion, so we need to do our due diligence now. So thank you. I'm going to move forward. Thank you very much.
thank you.
We appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gracias.
Yes.
What happened, I was looking at the agenda and my eyes fell on the MOUs and I missed 3.03. So here's what I'm going to say about 3.03. It's a combination of questions that people have asked that are all very important questions. It's the question I ask myself anytime I see a question: what is the governance in that question? And that's the reason why I asked everyone that had a question to pull one level back just to identify the category from which that question came. As an example, because one of the things that's going to happen, see, one of the conversations I had with Holland was that once you start gathering those questions, you got to have a methodology to process them to get to the answers that we need. And so, as we're reflecting on this potentially the new format of doing business, one of the things I asked everybody to do was to actually look at the question and move one level back from the question just to give me the category that it belongs to. And so what we can try to do at that point, oh, here's. I know the very first one I had of it was MSEP 6, and we're going to address that on August 28th. I know that Director Edwards has a number of questions. I think her first one was around the evaluative process for the CSEP. So we're going to get to that on August 28th, and we're going to flush that out. The, the next one you have, I said, looks like school safety was the broader category. The next one is attendance. Um, the one action steps that NSC, what category would you put that in? I know it's around strategic priorities, but what broad category does that go under?
Give me a second. That is under strategic priority number 3.
Okay. And strategic priority number 3, you just
Top talent, recruitment, development, hold accountable and retain top talent by supporting social, emotional well-being, deepening content,
okay.
knowledge, and
Got you. So it's an HR category. Okay. Um, as you continue, so the communications plan, what category does that fall under?
It's part of engagement.
impactful partner here. Yes. Strategic priority number 4, impactful partnerships, strengthening family and community partnerships through tighter coordination and alignment to strategic priorities.
Got you. Now you have initiatives. You had the last 3 bullets. Do those fall under number 4 as well? Or is that academic?
Yes, yes.
Academic?
No, number 4, it falls under the same.
Okay. And then the last we had, what information do we share with our community about our enrollment process and expectations? What if you back that question, what category does that fall under?
We can put it let me just make sure that I didn't already under that same categories.
Okay, number 4. Okay, Milton Roberts, you have a series of questions.
Yeah.
I just need to know the category that those fall under.
Okay, I'm not going to be as precise as she is, but I think.
But I need you to be.
Yeah, well, I think some of them are duplicative of hers. Is why I said that.
Okay.
So, for instance, the first one is it falls under the CSIP.
Okay. We can keep moving. We can go to the next one.
Okay. The next one, this is more of a. It really is around the HR, top talent recruitment.
Okay,
And so forth.
that's all I need. HR. Next one.
Not that quick. This one is
Is it academic?
academic.
Okay. Okay.
I'm trying to read them as fast as you're doing it here.
As a board, I'm at that one.
Yeah, okay. I think that's partnerships.
Okay, partnerships. Okay.
We're still going.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think on the other one, I had another one, but mine is really HR. And then Director Edwards, you had some more on another page. It starts with what action steps.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, that's HR.
yeah.
Okay, and then the next one is HR because it talks about exit interviews. Okay, the next one would be HR because it looks like you're talking about grow your own. Okay, and then you got 2 more. What categories are those? That's HR.
It's HR for the
Okay.
class. It's HR.
Okay, that's HR as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, move the next page, both high school and middle schools. Okay, that's HR.
Mhm.
How many subs? That's HR. Teacher shortage, HR. Okay, HR. Okay. See, what's the strategy?
SP1.
Is what?
That's kind of
Engagement environments, Strategic priority 1, I will put that.
Okay, number one. Okay. Now, Milton Robbins, looks like you have some. You have another page, right?
Yeah,
We
so-
need to go through.
The class size, I would say, is academics.
Okay.
The international features is kind of an HR one.
HR. Okay.
Academics.
Go ahead.
The yonder pouches is kind of a combination also because it's
It's really more school culture.
yeah, it's culture and it's also safety and it's like a couple of different.
Let's call it school safety.
Okay.
Okay.
The library is academics.
Okay.
Before and after care is impactful partnerships.
To partnerships. Okay.
The early learning is also academics, but it's also district growth, which is not really a category, but how
It's academic and what else?
it's about district growth. It's about
Just
yeah. Instead of growing our own teachers, how are we growing our own students?
okay, we'll just call it academics as a broad category.
Okay.
Okay, number 5.
Number 5 is
Okay.
is the one we're going to table. So
Okay, right. That's partnerships. Okay.
Partnerships, yeah.
Okay, and then Dr. Petty. No. Okay, yeah, that's our part of the other one. Dr. Petty, you had some questions.
Yeah, mine are pretty basic, so I'm sure you got the categories.
Right.
No, I don't have any categories. I need you to tell me what they are. They're your questions, just like I do everybody.
What's the first one?
It says, are staff being directed to? It was about student record integrity.
Okay, so that would be that's part of the CSIP plan.
Okay, CSIP. Okay. Okay, the next one will be CSIP as well. Okay, there's something around. I guess this would probably be student support. You were asking questions about follow up around child molestation and things of that nature.
Student support and HR possibly.
Okay, HR student support. Okay. Okay, then you talked about reporting the mechanisms for district incidences on buses. So how would that be school safety?
School safety, yeah.
Okay. Okay, as it relates to hiring, because that's HR. Okay, cancellation of middle school. Okay, that's you were talking. Apparently, there was a question about middle.
That was back in the spring, I think.
Is that admin related?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We answered some of yours at the last.
I think that was from the first work session.
Yeah, we answered most of those.
Yeah, we've answered.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
But they were still on the list, and I wasn't at that meeting. So
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, you were.
no, I wasn't. I was out
The
of the
country. That's what I was trying to say.
Oh,
I was
okay.
agreeing with you.
I'm sorry. Who's that?
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, if we've already answered what I tried to do with this,
Some of them haven't been answered. That one in particular regarding the middle school ceremony has been addressed, but some of those others have not.
okay, and the reason why I backed up one level from the question is I'm trying to get the broader governance category that it belongs to. So that as we process, if we decide to make that adjustment in how we do business, then we can bring these categories up, and then with respective questions like dive into to get to answer those questions and get you found because was a random list of questions, and I'm trying to put more focus because we're doing. So I'm going to share this with Harlan that we went through this exercise to kind of synthesize this to get under which stuff falls so we can have more meaningful conversations around it. Because as we look at this, one of the things that jumped out at me was the one around the yonder pouches, because we need to have a really hard look at our policy around safe food. We need to understand how it could be, because all of this shapes school culture. And so we just need, at some point, we just need to have some intentional conversations around that. Because I know I had a conversation with an adult once, and they said they asked kids, well, why do you not like the yonder pouches? Why do you do what? Because I don't want to use them. And that's why I tear them up. And so there's an education process we got to have that goes along with implementation. So anyway, I appreciate, it was my intention to get us out of here before 7:30. I think we're within 10. And at this point,
Well,
We got somewhere to go.
we're at 5.01, which is board announcements and comments. Dr. Petty, you got anything for the good of the order?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes, there was one of the points on here that I think is very important that we talk about or get on the list, and that is we have to, I think, at some point come up with what our process is to continuously have a feedback loop and a process for review of things that we do so that we have continuous improvement on everything that we do.
And that's great. If in fact we adopt a new method of doing business, that's the appropriate time to have that conversation around how we process information for continuous improvement.
Well, be clarified. I'm not speaking exclusively of board. I'm speaking of the district.
Okay, so at this point,
You know, Dr. Triplet information,
okay, what happens, we have to start at the board level,
Yeah.
understanding how we effectively govern. And once we decide how we're going to govern, it's up to us how we direct him to do in support of the district. So we first got to make sure we understand whatever that is. And then as it interfaces with his work, we can begin to share that and bring that over. Ms. Pearson, you got anything?
um, let's all hold each other accountable
Absolutely.
for our roles in this district.
Okay.
Whether it's as a parent, a guardian, a board member, a community stakeholder.
Yeah, I
That's all
appreciate
got for tonight.
I appreciate those comments. Erica, do you have anything for us, Ms. Edwards?
No, I don't at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Taylor, you got anything for us?
Thank you to each of you all for your dedication to this joint executive governing board.
And my only comment is I would like to thank each of my board colleagues for what I believe was a meaningful discussion tonight. When I first looked at the agenda, I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to process this to get us to where we are. But I appreciate everyone's meaningful comments. I appreciate the Brooks being here. I appreciate the superintendent being here and our board secretary being here. So I thank you for leaning in on the structure that we're creating. With that being said, I entertain the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, superintendent. So,
John, I do want to recognize our visitor in the audience. What's your name? I'm sorry. Monica. What do you do, Monica? Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you for joining us tonight. So really quick though, when because there's a lot of conversation around what is board governance versus superintendent operations, and so the best way when you start mapping out your questions, two things should really come to mind. One, what is the governance in that? And the other piece is how does it impact the superintendent's ability to manage the day-to-day operations? Those are two major questions when we start formulating what our questions should be to the superintendent.
and that's part of the reason why I wanted to step back from the questions to kind of get the broader category so we at least have an umbrella under which to have those discussions. So once again, I thank everyone for coming. We have a motion and a second to adjourn, and thank you very much for those clarifying comments, Dr. Triplett. We got a motion?
Second. I didn't get who did the first and second to close us out.
Director Taylor and then myself.
Okay. So it's a motion and a second that this meeting will stand adjourned. We stand adjourned. Well, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody contrary?